Hello there, this is Rom Wills coming back at you with yet another podcast. Why men will be select in some regions and not in others. Now remember something. I'm the one who introduced the whole select, non-select language to this area, and it's just one way of looking at. Other people might say alpha and beta. Some people might even not use none of them and just say who the top dog. I met a cat one time. He said, "Who's a rooster? Who's the big rooster in the yard?" And so the same thing. That being said, it's not a universal thing. The select thing ain't universal. When I say that is, dude could be select in one region or one city. He could be the man, but then you take him to another area, he ain't the man anymore. Now, remember, a lot of people like to think shit's universal, like looks is universal or anything. It's like, no, it's cultural. Like with men, like if a woman is generally pretty and she got a nice body, whatever the man likes, regardless of her culture, he's going to want to stick her. He is going to want to stick her. But because of her culture, she's going to judge you and have certain protocols based on that culture. So, it might be that's the class thing, that's the subculture, that's the region. And, the top dude, you might be the man wherever you living, but then you go someplace else and it's just like, huh? Like, here's a story. I ain't told y'all a story in a while. Back in, when was this? I think it was 93. I was working on a project in Morgan City, Louisiana. So, I came down there. I came looking a certain way, but I looked around and I was just like, this ain't my speed. And I don't think the women were looking at me quite the same way. Because I remember I was down there, and I don't know how the region is now, but, at the time, I was in an area where, like, most of the white people had voted for David Duke for governor, And then on that project, I was working with some locals. They let me know right away where to go, where not to go. In fact, a funny story like that, this one white woman, she said to me, she was straight up. She was like, "Hey, you from D.C., right?" Yeah. I was like, "Yeah." "Y'all date interracially up there, don't you?" "Yeah." She's like, "We don't do that here." I was like, "Okay." Man, I just laughed. She was honest, she was polite and honest, but they basically let me know where to go and not to go. But anyway, I was talking, to meet some black folks down there, and they said, "Oh yeah, this is where the club is." Now the club wasn't in Morgan City. It was in a little small town over, like a small area. It wasn't even on the map. They had to tell me, give me some very good directions how to get there. And, I got there, I'm dressed fly. I had a nice little shirt on, had some slacks, had my shoes shine. Everybody in there was like, all the dudes were in there with some jeans and some white t-shirts. They were friendly, though. And shoot, the club was on some, like, the road wasn't even paved. It was just like dirt road and stuff. I was like, wow. I'm still in the U.S. But I was thinking about it, and I thought about it. At the time, I ain't used the term select or non-select, Mr. Goodbar, alpha, definitely not alpha, beta. But I used the word top dog, and I remember distinctly thinking, I was like, the top dog around here probably don't have to dress up that much. And that's a real thing, That's a real thing. It's it's city by city, and it's some deeper stuff to it. Like, okay, I live outside of Baltimore now, but I grew up in D.C. And I remember a woman pointed out the difference between D.C. guys and Baltimore guys. In her words, she said D.C. guys were a bit more suave. But part of that's a cultural thing, economic thing. Like in Baltimore's a blue-collar town. And, despite what some people who are unpolitically sophisticated think, it wasn't the place hadn't really gone down just because there was some black folks here. You get some black and white, they just politically unsophisticated. The issue was the major industries went out. When steel mills leave any place, the major manufacturing, I don't care what the city is, what the color is, it goes out. But that's another conversation. If you don't have jobs, people don't make money, then you get a cascading effect. But what had happened was it's more of a blue collar type of vibe. So the dudes are more blue collar, even now. But then you contrast that with the DC area. DC, the main industry is government. You know, the main industry is the government. So it's more of an intellectual thing. You got the schools, everything. And yeah, you got schools in Baltimore, but it's a whole different vibe. Like anybody in DC know that whole K Street area, that area near George Washington University, near the White House. Even if you're not with the government, you're probably with a major law firm. Everybody has a major law firm, lobbying firms, everything. It's more of an intellectual vibe. So it's a different energy. It's more of a professional energy, you know. And because of that, someone who might be the man in Baltimore might not be the man in D.C. But at the same time, somebody who's the man in D.C. might not be the man in Baltimore. And that's every single city. Every single city have a certain energy. It depends on what energy. It's a combination of what type of people move there, what type of economics, schools, everything, which churches or spiritual systems are dominant. Because, I mean, you got some areas, I'm familiar with some people who were living in some, what they said was some Muslim areas in Philly. Now, this is according to, I have never been to those areas, but they just said, you had a lot of Muslims here. So that's going to affect, not just a regional thing, but, somebody coming in, they might not be on that tip. All of that. Or you get somebody who grew up in an area that's poor or gang dominated. You might look good in other areas, but you go there, boom. And that's just part of it. It's a nuance. See, it's not like a solid thing. It's not a mathematical thing. I think that's the thing sometimes people think. Like I had, briefly mentioned that, how some people, or did I do it in this video? I gotta go back and listen, but I'll say it again here, if I did. But you get some people who think, if they look a certain way, they can go anywhere on the planet and get somebody. No, that's not the case. That's not the case. Because there's always going to be some nuances. Remember the thing, for the fellas listening, remember the thing about women. Yes, looks matter to them. Yes, they checking out your looks, but they also looking at every other thing. And one of the biggest things is culture. Are you within their culture? One thing women do, they enforce a culture. It's like men who actually create it or create something, but women kind of expand upon it and they enforce it. And usually when they're looking for a man, they looking for a man who's as culturally similar to them as possible. And that culture is, even with interracial dating and stuff, it's still the race thing, it's still religion, class, education level, everything. Because the root word of relationship is relate. So ultimately, women have to feel comfortable with that person. So they looking at all that stuff. So what might work with one group of women doesn't work with the other. That's one of the reasons in past videos I said you got to find your tribe. You got to figure out who feeling you and who not. That's a very important piece. Because you're not going to be that. You have to find really ultimately who you select with. Now, there's some general stuff, like some guys are going to be select with a wide range of women. And then those are the ones I would consider truly select. But even them, even the most select, I don't care what they look like, what they built like. There's going to be some women ain't feeling them. It could be just because you ain't practicing the same religion. Something like that. Or, you don't know the nuances of this particular area. So, anyway, something to think about. Like, I'll just say it like this. Sometimes if you ain't doing well in one particular region, you might need to move. So, ain't nothing wrong with it. It is what it is. So, anyway, that's all I have for today. Peace and many blessings.